In the aftermath of the Westgate massacre, Kenyan authorities name 4 men believed to have taken part in the Islamist militant attack on the Nairobi Mall 2 weeks ago. Officials had previously said that between 10 and 15 militants were involved in the violence. As fishermen lay a wreath at sea for the victims of Thursday's accident, Italian rescuers say they have a legal but also a moral responsibility to recover the bodies of every last victim. 300 asylum seekers are feared dead in the shipwreck off Lampedusa Island. And we have far more questions for the Dutch side than they can have for us. Russia shrugs off Dutch legal action over its detention and prosecution of Greenpeace activists. The group was charged with piracy after protesting at an Arctic oil platform. Hello, I'm Nadia Shabi. Thank you for watching France 24. Kenyan officials have named 4 men suspected of taking part in the attack on a Nairobi shopping mall last month. CCTV footage from the Westgate Centre was broadcast on national television channels this Saturday, apparently showing at least 4 attackers walking around with guns. According to the authorities, all 4 assailants were killed in the police raid. Clovis Kazali has this report.
This footage shows Abu Bara al-Sudani, an Islamist militant from Sudan, identified by the Kenyan army as the leader of the group that carried out September's deadly attack on Nairobi's shopping mall. He's described as an experienced fighter trained by Al-Qaeda. The other members of the group include Hatab al-Kene, a Somali from Mogadishu, and Omar Naban, a Kenyan from the port city of Mombasa. The KDF, the Kenyan Defence Forces, announced on Saturday that the armed men who stormed the mall were all killed during the 80-hour-long siege. Authorities initially said that 10 to 15 men had carried out the attack. They were in fact no more than 6, according to Kenyan police. Somalia's Shabab claimed responsibility for the attack.
I think it's been easy logistically for these fighters to be trained in Somalia and to go back to Kenya, but it's also been easy for al-Shabaab to recruit, disaffected youth and other religious youth in Kenya through the networks that they've established in the country over the last couple of years.
Kenyan authorities have ruled out the possibility that Britain's so-called White Widow was part of the attackers. She was at first one of the leading suspects.
Well, as we've just seen, Somali militants from the al-Shabaab Islamist group claimed responsibility for the Westgate attack. And exactly 2 weeks on, a military raid has targeted fighters in Somalia this Saturday, with officials describing the targets as high profile. Now, there's little official information about what foreign forces took part in that raid, but al-Shabaab has made a statement. Our Nairobi correspondent Duncan Woodside tells us more.
Al-Shabaab, shortly before we came on air, said that they had been attacked at the port of Barawe, which is about 180 kilometers south of Mogadishu. That's one of the few urban strongholds that they have left after various operations by Western-backed African Union forces over the past couple of years. What they're saying is that there was a raid which was by boat and helicopter, in which they're claiming a British commander was killed, and apparently what they're saying as well is that it was a joint attack by British and Turkish special forces. There's no indication from any other sources to corroborate that information, and generally speaking, Western embassies and Western officials remain very tight-lipped about any operations that they undertake in Somalia unless that involves the extrication of hostages. These black op operations are not usually commented upon, so we don't have any confirmation of that information coming from al-Shabaab at the moment.
And in response to those claims by al-Shabaab, the Turkish Foreign Ministry now denies any Turkish involvement in this Saturday's raid in Somalia. Now, when their ship capsized Thursday off the Italian island of Lampedusa, up to 500 people were on board, and just 150 survivors were plucked from the sea by rescuers. 2 days later, the focus is now on finding the remaining bodies. 111 have already been counted, and rescuers are vowing to continue the search until every last victim can be given a decent resting place.
While helicopters patrol the area where the disaster unfolded, rescue boats are forced to stay in port. Rough waters and strong winds have made it impossible to head to sea on Saturday to retrieve the remaining bodies of the African migrants. More than 200 are still missing, and some of those who helped save lives now accuse Coast Guards of hampering efforts. We would have saved more people, but Coast Guard said it wasn't the right protocol. I had to tell them, I'm heading to the port now with these people. You do what you need to do. Do you know what it's like to see what I saw? A sea filled with people calling for help. The boat, packed with some 500 African migrants, capsized on Thursday after they started a fire in the hope of alerting the Coast Guards. On board, many women and children who had spent 2 days at sea travelling from Libya. Most of them came from Somalia and Eritrea. The scale of the disaster has left residents of the small island deeply shocked.
We will always try to help these people. Lampedusa is a small spot in the middle of the sea where everyone can find a place to rest. We are here for everyone: Syrians, Tunisians, Greeks and Turks. And our history speaks for itself.
Italy is calling for Europe to act together and adopt a new set of measures. Authorities also want stricter control along the African coasts where the migrants leave from.
Well, many of the victims of Thursday's shipwreck are believed to be Somalian and Eritrean citizens, and both countries have officially offered condolences this Saturday. While Somalians are fleeing over 2 decades of war, as well as recent famine and drought, Eritrea's repressive government and bleak economy has left thousands of people looking for jobs abroad. Nicolas Germain explains.
Every time migrants are found dead off the coast of Lampedusa, officials say most of them are from Eritrea. It was once again the case on Thursday. Why do so many people take such risks to flee this nation of 6 million people in the Horn of Africa? We asked the question to the Eritrean authorities. They said they would comment on the issue after a time of mourning.
There's not much one we can say. I mean, this is a tragedy. This is a time to express condolences to the families. Other statements, they can come later. At the moment, I think the only thing one can say is express condolences.
The UN says some 3,000 people try to flee the country each month. It estimates there are now more than 250,000 Eritrean refugees in the world. Those who flee say there is no freedom of expression in the country, no private media. Human rights groups estimate that there are 10,000 political prisoners. Most Eritreans explain they leave because of a military service that never ends. The government in Asmara says it needs a strong army because of tensions with its neighbour Ethiopia. Eritrea became independent in 1993 after a 3-decade-long struggle against Ethiopia. They clashed again in a 2-year border war in 1998 that killed some 70,000 people. In recent years, Eritrea has become increasingly isolated. It feels the international community is not firm enough with its much bigger Ethiopian neighbour, which refuses to accept a binding border demarcation issued by an independent commission in 2002.
Police in Madagascar say they've made 5 more arrests on the tourist island of Nosy Be this Saturday after a mob lynched and burned 2 Europeans and a local man that they accused of killing an 8-year-old boy. A total of 19 people have been arrested on the idyllic Indian Ocean island, and authorities are vowing to arrest anyone else involved in the lynchings, as well as anyone who filmed or photographed the killings. Tunisia's political crisis is one step closer to being resolved this Saturday. Both the ruling Islamist Ennahda party and the opposition have signed a roadmap for the creation of a government of independence within the next 3 weeks. The document plans for the nomination of an independent prime minister by the end of next week. The following 2 weeks will be used then for the formation of a cabinet. Going now to the US, and as the stalemate continues, President Barack Obama is calling on the lower chamber of Congress to take action by unconditionally approving a federal budget. But as Republican lawmakers still refuse to approve money for government operations without at least delaying the president's new healthcare law, the government shutdown is having an effect even on the US's plans overseas. Obama has already cancelled his trip to Indonesia, and issues such as the enforcement of sanctions against Iran and Syria have also been put on the back burner. Take a listen to the US leader who's clearly losing patience.
There's only one way out of this reckless and damaging shutdown. Pass a budget that funds our government, with no partisan strings attached. The Senate's already done this, and there are enough Republicans and Democratic votes in the House of Representatives willing to do the same and end this shutdown immediately. Unfortunately, the far right of the Republican Party won't let Speaker Boehner give that bill a yes or no vote. Take that vote. Stop this farce. End this shutdown now.
Well, as for the 800,000 federal employees left out of a job during this shutdown, they shouldn't be out of pocket, as the House has already voted to make up for lost pay once the government reopens. The White House backs the bill and the Senate is expected to approve it too. Now, in other world news, Greenpeace supporters have been holding vigils across the globe this Saturday in support of 30 activists jailed by Russia. The group was arrested on September the 19th after staging a protest against Arctic oil drilling, with several activists scaling an oil platform owned by Russian energy giant Gazprom. Now, pressure has been mounting on Moscow from both activists and governments, all shocked by the decision to level full-blown piracy charges against the Greenpeace members, charges that carry jail terms of up to 15 years. In fact, the Dutch authorities have even announced their decision to take legal action against Russia. A little earlier, we spoke to the Guardian's Moscow correspondent Sean Walker, who began by telling us why, in the face of such concern and activists out on the streets, the Kremlin is standing firm.
It's been a really interesting one, this, because we have been seeing slightly mixed signals. A week ago, we heard Vladimir Putin come out and very clearly say that it was completely obvious that these Greenpeace activists were not pirates. He said they were breaking the law, but he said it's obvious they're not pirates. And of course, we all thought when Putin said that, of course, the courts here are technically independent, but we know that there's a huge amount of pressure on them from the Kremlin. So we thought, well, that's that. And then, of course, these full-blown piracy charges, and it does look like we're going to see trials of these activists, which could see them in jail for 10 or up to 15 years. I think there's two schools of thought here. One is that this is a scare tactic just to make sure that in future nobody tries anything similar. And sooner or later, the Russian authorities will back off or drop the charges rather than really pursue with sending nationals of 18 different countries to prison for 15 years. But then there's another school of thought that says, once charges are brought in Russian courts, it's very rare that we don't see a trial and then a conviction.
And this case is further souring relations between Russia and the West. It's after the gay rights issue. Are we witnessing some sort of culture clash at the moment?
Well, I think there's certainly this period of very chilly relations, and as you say, there is definitely on things like the gay issue, there's certainly a clash of cultures and a clash of values, and if you talk to average Russians on the street, they have very different views to what average Western Europeans might have. I do think on this case, on this Greenpeace case, there is a very specific reason behind this. There's Russia's defense of its claim to the Arctic. Russia wants to make sure that nobody meddles with its installations in the Arctic. And of course, there have been a lot of discussions about the status of the Arctic in recent years. Should it be internationally administered like Antarctica? Should it be jointly split between the countries that have Arctic coastlines? And Russia's been very clear. It planted its flag on the seabed underneath the North Pole in 2007. It's been very clear that all of this territory is Russian territory, and it has the right on its own to develop any natural resources there. And I think what we're seeing with Greenpeace is partly the Russians' dislike of any kind of protest, but there's also a very specific geopolitical message there.
Well, Russia is hosting this winter's Olympic Games in the city of Sochi, and this Saturday the Olympic flame made its way through central Athens before being officially handed over to the Sochi organisers. And we'll be leaving you on those pictures. Stay tuned to France 24.
New technologies, the latest digital innovations and their impact on society. Tech24, the unmissable high-tech rendezvous. Monday, 4:45 p.m. Paris time on France 24.